Ever wonder what connects the price of your morning coffee to the number on your paycheck? Well, it turns out they're driven by the exact same force. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the invisible economic engine that's quietly shaping your entire financial world.
So let's start with the big one. What really decides how much you get paid? I mean, we all like to think it's our brilliant resume, right? Or our amazing negotiation skills.
And look, of course, those things matter. They really do. But they're kind of like the little ripples on the surface of a huge ocean. The real power is a massive, invisible wave underneath it all. That massive wave, it's the very same principle that sets the price of your coffee, a new car, and, yep, your salary. It's the fundamental, inescapable law of supply and demand. Okay, so let's apply this big idea to a place we all know pretty well, the job market. And don't worry about any complicated jargon. The way this works is actually surprisingly simple. In the job market, you have to flip your thinking. You are the supplier. You're supplying your skills, your time, your labor. The company, they're the customer, the one demanding that labor. And the price that you both agree on, well, that's your wage. To make this crystal clear, let's look at a real-world example from a few years back. The market for registered nurses in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. Okay, check this out. If the salary is set at $75,000, hospitals are desperate for nurses, but there just aren't enough to go around. That's a classic shortage. But if you crank the salary way up to $90,000, you get the opposite problem. A whole bunch of nurses who want jobs, but not enough open positions. That's a surplus. The market is out of whack. But look, right there in the middle at $85,000, boom, everything just clicks. That's what economists call the equilibrium salary. Demand perfectly meets supply. Every hospital that wants a nurse finds one, and every nurse who wants a job gets one. The market finds its balance. Now here's where it gets really cool. This whole logic of supply, demand, and finding that perfect balance, it doesn't just apply to jobs. It applies to money itself. So, in the world of finance, if you have money in a savings account, you're not just a saver. You're a supplier of capital. The person or the business taking out a loan is the demander, and the price they pay to use your money for a little while, that, my friends, is the interest rate. Think about something we all know, credit cards. Back in 2021, a full 45% of American families were carrying a credit card balance. That means nearly half the country was on the demand side of this market. They were demanding to borrow money. And just like with the nurses' salaries, there's a balancing point. For credit cards, that equilibrium interest rate often hovers around 15%. You see, if rates suddenly shot up to 25%, way fewer people would want to borrow, and you'd have a surplus of available credit. If they dropped to 5%, you'd have a shortage because banks wouldn't be as eager to lend. So the market naturally pushes itself toward that sweet spot, that 15% balance. But of course, in the real world, these markets are not set in stone. They're alive, they're constantly moving. So what happens when a big, powerful outside force, like a new technology or a new government policy, shows up and starts shaking things up? Let's take new tech. Its impact can seem really complicated, but we can actually understand it with a simple four-step process. We just start at our happy equilibrium point. And then we watch how technology comes in and completely changes what employers demand. And this right here, this is the critical part. You get this great divide. For some jobs, technology is a substitute. It can do the work instead of a person. That pushes demand for those workers down, and wages fall. But for other jobs, technology is a complement. It makes a skilled human worker even more productive and valuable. And that pushes demand and wages up. And this isn't just some abstract theory. The real-world results are staggering. In 1980, a college grad in the US earned about 30% more than a high school grad. By 2019, that gap had almost doubled to 59%. That is a massive shift. Okay, so what happens when the government tries to influence these prices directly? This brings us to the idea of a price floor, which is exactly what it sounds like. A rule that says a price can't go any lower than a certain level. And the most famous example of this is, of course, the minimum wage. So let's imagine a city where the natural equilibrium wage is $10 an hour. But the government steps in and sets a price floor, a minimum wage of $12. So what happens? Well, at $12 an hour, more people want to work. But companies want to hire fewer people. You've created a surplus. But in the job market, what do we call a surplus of labor? We call it unemployment. So, what's the big idea that connects all of this? It's recognizing that a price, whether it's a salary, an interest rate, or the cost of a gallon of milk, is never, ever just a number. It's so much more than that. Prices are not random. They are powerful, silent messengers. They're constantly collecting and broadcasting information across the entire economy about what's scarce and what we as a society truly value. They're like the nervous system of the economy. Which leads us to that very old, very wise warning, don't kill the messenger. Because when policies like price controls are put in place, even with the absolute best intentions, they can accidentally silence these crucial messages and stop the market from doing its job of finding a balance. And ignoring these messages can have consequences that are just catastrophic. During China's Great Leap Forward in the 1950s, the government set food prices to be artificially low, while the message to farmers was loud and clear. Your work isn't valuable. So what did? They produced less. The result was one of the worst famines in all of human history. It's a terrifying lesson in what can happen when you shut down the messenger. So that brings the final question back to you. If every single price is a message, a signal about value, scarcity, and opportunity, what messages are the prices in your life trying to tell you? Thanks for tuning in.